What if the landscape you walk upon is not natural at all, but deliberate? What if the hills that roll across continents, softened by millennia of grass and weather, are not the work of glaciers or rivers, but hands? Human hands, building something so immense that we forgot it was ever built. Stand at the edge of any valley, and the earth rises and falls in gentle waves. We call these formations natural. We walk our dogs across them. We plant crops on their slopes. But beneath some of these mounds, invisible to the casual eye, geometries wait. Perfect angles, astronomical alignments, chambers sealed in darkness for so long that the air inside them has never been breathed by anyone alive today. This is not folklore. This is archaeology's quiet crisis. Artificial hills, scattered across every inhabited continent, hiding architecture we are only now beginning to measure. And the deeper we look, the stranger the pattern becomes. Before we go further into what sleeps beneath the earth, if this kind of history speaks to you, the kind that asks questions older than any answer we've been given, consider subscribing. Not for the algorithm's sake, but because these stories deserve witnesses. And in the comments, tell me, where are you listening from? What hill, what landscape surrounds you right now? Perhaps you're closer to this mystery than you think. The word mound feels innocent, modest. It suggests something small, perhaps the work of a single community, a burial site or ceremonial platform. But the reality is far more unnerving. Across the Mississippi River Valley alone, more than 100,000 earthen mounds once stood. 100,000. Most have been plowed under, built over, forgotten. But those that remain, those that have been studied, reveal something astonishing. They were not random. They were not scattered by chance. Many of them align, not with rivers or roads, but with the stars. Cahokia, the largest pre-Columbian settlement north of Mexico, is centered on a mound called Monk's Mound. It rises 30 meters, its base covering more than 5 hectares. Larger than the base of the Great Pyramid. And it is oriented precisely to the cardinal directions. Stand at its summit during the equinoxes, and the sun rises exactly where the ancient builders intended it to. This was not accident. This was astronomy rendered in earth. But Cahokia is not alone. Across the ocean, in what is now the United Kingdom, another kind of mound rises. Silbury Hill, a perfect cone of chalk and earth, 40 meters high, built around 2,400 years before the Common Era. For centuries, archaeologists have tunneled into it, searching for a burial chamber, a temple, some explanation for why Neolithic people would move 500,000 cubic meters of material to build a hill. They found nothing. No body, no treasure, just chalk, soil, and grass. The effort required to build it staggers the mind. An estimated 18 million man-hours. Generations of labor, all to raise a hill that seems to serve no purpose. Unless the purpose was the hill itself. Unless the geometry, the placement, the very fact of its existence was the message. And the pattern continues. In what is now Poland, near the village of Sarnowo, archaeologists discovered something in the forest that had been dismissed as natural for centuries. A hill. But ground-penetrating radar revealed a different story. Beneath the soil, a massive stone structure. Not a temple or a tomb. Pyramid. Older than Silbury. Older than many of the monuments we've been taught to revere. And it had been deliberately buried. Not collapsed. Not eroded. Buried. Covered with earth and left to become landscape. Why would any civilization build something immense, only to hide it? To ensure it remained, perhaps, long after memory faded. To preserve it beneath the one thing that endures longer than stone, the earth itself. The implications of this practice, this deliberate concealment, ripple outward in unsettling ways. If mounds are not always natural, then how many hills have we misidentified? How much of our landscape is architecture, disguised by time and vegetation? LiDAR technology, which uses laser pulses to map terrain beneath forest canopies, has revolutionized archaeology in the past 2 decades. In Central America, it revealed entire Mayan cities hidden under jungle. In Cambodia, it showed that Angkor what was just the ceremonial heart of a vast urban network. And in Europe, It is now revealing that many of the hills we've walked past for generations are too regular, too aligned to be natural. The earth has been reshaped, not in one place, not by one people, but across the world. And much of that reshaping has been hidden, either by intention or by the slow work of centuries. Consider the Bosnian pyramids, a controversial site near Visoko. Samir Osmanagic claims they are ancient pyramids, older than Giza, buried beneath what appear to be natural hills. Mainstream archaeology largely dismisses him. The hills are natural, they say, flatirons, geological formations. But geophysical surveys have found chambers, tunnels, and concrete-like materials inside them. Materials that do not occur naturally. The debate rages. But the question it raises is legitimate. If a civilization wanted to preserve monumental architecture across deep time, burying it under earth would be one of the most effective methods. Stone weathers, metal corrodes, but earth protects. And earth, given enough time, looks like nature. The mounds do not stand alone. This is where the unsettling deepens. It is one thing to find a single artificial hill, an anomaly, a curiosity. It is another to find them networked, aligned, communicating across landscapes in a language of geometry and light. In Ohio, the ancient Hopewell culture built earthworks that sprawl across kilometers. Not simple mounds, but vast geometric enclosures. Circles, squares, octagons, all linked by embankments and ditches. The Newark Earthworks, one of the largest, covers more than 11 square kilometers. And it is aligned with breathtaking precision to the 18.6-year lunar cycle. The moon's most extreme rising and setting points, its standstills, are marked by the earthwork's geometry. To create this, the builders needed not just knowledge of astronomy, but patience spanning generations. They needed to observe, to record, to calculate. And then, they needed to move Earth on a scale that defies the image we have of primitive cultures. Across the Atlantic, in the British Isles, the same patterns emerge. Avebury, a Neolithic henge monument, encircles part of a village with a massive ditch and outer bank. Inside, stone circles. But the henge itself is aligned to solar and lunar events. And it is connected via the West Kennet Avenue to other monuments. A processional way, marked by standing stones, linking sacred sites across the landscape. This was not random. This was intentional design on a territorial scale. The landscape itself became the architecture, with individual monuments as nodes in a larger, invisible structure. In North America, the pattern repeats. The Great Serpent Mound in Ohio winds across the land for over 400 meters, its head aligned to the summer solstice sunset. It is not a burial mound. No artifacts have been found inside it. It is pure form, pure symbol, etched into the earth. And it is part of a broader tradition. Effigy mounds, shaped like animals, birds, humans, dot the Midwest. They are not accidental. They are representational. They are art on a scale that can only be fully appreciated from above. Which raises its own question. Why build images meant to be seen from the sky in an era before flight? Unless the builders believed someone or something was watching. And then, there is the scale that dwarfs even these. In the Amazon rainforest, LiDAR has revealed geoglyphs. Massive earthworks, geometric shapes, ditches, and mounds arranged in patterns that cover hundreds of square kilometers. For centuries, scholars believed the Amazon was too hostile, too thick, to support large populations. But the geoglyphs tell a different story. The forest we see now is young. Before colonization, before disease-decimated indigenous populations, the Amazon was managed, cultivated, shaped, and part of that shaping involved moving earth, creating enclosures, aligning structures. The forest has reclaimed them, but the geometry remains, visible only from above or through the penetrating gaze of technology. What ties these sites together is not proximity. They are separated by oceans, by thousands of years, by cultures with no known contact. What ties them together is intention, the deliberate alteration of landscape to encode meaning, to mark time, to align with the cosmos. This is not the behavior of scattered tribes stumbling toward civilization. This is the behavior of cultures with deep cosmological knowledge, cultures that saw the earth and sky as intertwined. The authority was not political but cosmological, unless the mounds were not commanded by kings, but by a shared understanding of the universe, a common language of earth and star. In Indonesia, Gunung Padang, another controversial site, presents a mound atop a mountain, beneath which ground-penetrating radar and core samples suggest massive chambers and carved stone. Some layers dated to over 20,000 years ago. If accurate, it predates the end of the last ice age. Predates agriculture. It predates every conventional marker of civilization. And it is built, not naturally formed, but constructed. Layers of columnar basalt, arranged, not haphazardly, but with intent. Archaeologists debate its age, its purpose, its very authenticity. But the physical evidence is difficult to dismiss. Something is there. Something old. Something that does not fit the timeline we have agreed upon. And here is the unnerving question. What if the timeline is wrong? What if the civilizations we call first were not first but inheritors? What if the mounds are not the beginning of monumental architecture, but its end? The final, desperate attempt to preserve knowledge, to mark territory, to ensure that something, anything, survived whatever catastrophe erased the original builders? The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests a comet strike around 12,800 years ago, triggering rapid climate change, megafaunal extinctions, and the collapse of nascent human societies. If cultures existed then, cultures sophisticated enough to understand astronomy and build in stone, their monuments would have been buried by time, by rising seas, by the simple fact that the world they built for no longer existed. And their survivors, scattered, reduced, would have remembered. And perhaps they would have rebuilt. Not in stone, which requires resources and stability, but in earth, in mounds, placing markers across the land, encoding what they knew, hoping future generations would understand. The decision to bury architecture is not unprecedented in recorded history. The ancient Persians, when abandoning a site, would sometimes bury structures to protect them. The Romans, in times of conflict, would conceal valuables beneath false floors, beneath earth. But these were acts of desperation or strategic preservation. What the mounds suggest is something more deliberate. A culture or cultures that chose earth as the medium of immortality. Not because they lacked stone, but because earth endures in a way stone cannot. Stone can be toppled, repurposed, dissolved by rain. Earth becomes landscape, and landscape is invisible. It is everywhere. It is the ground beneath every footstep, unnoticed, unchallenged, waiting. The Poverty Point culture, for instance, constructed their site with no permanent structures atop the mounds. No temples, no palaces, just earth shaped into ridges and platforms. Archaeologists have found post holes, suggesting temporary buildings, but nothing monumental in the traditional sense. The monumentality was the earth itself. The landscape was the architecture, and it was designed to last, not in defiance of nature, but by becoming nature. This is genius of a different order. Not the genius of engineering, but the genius of camouflage, a patience, of a deep time strategy that assumes forgetting is inevitable and plans for it. In the Orkney Islands, off the northern coast of Scotland, the Neolithic site of the Ness of Brodger was discovered only in the past few decades, buried beneath farmland. Ground-penetrating radar revealed massive stone structures, temples, halls, walls painted in intricate designs. It had been covered, deliberately, with refuse and earth, sealing it from view. Why? Ritual closure, some suggest. A way of ending a sacred era, of marking the transition from one age to another. But the effect is the same, preservation through concealment. The structures survived because they were hidden, because they were taken out of the world, entrusted to the earth. And then, there are the mounds that are not mounds at all, but natural hills that were modified, enhanced, made sacred. Mount Shasta, in California, is considered sacred by indigenous peoples, and oral traditions speak of cities inside the mountain, of people who live within. Mainstream geology sees only a volcano, but acoustic surveys have detected anomalies, hollow spaces, chambers that do not fit the expected volcanic structure. Are they natural lava tubes or something else? The line between natural and artificial blurs when you consider that ancient peoples often chose sites with natural significance and then enhanced them, carving, shaping, adding layers. The earth and the human intention merge until they are indistinguishable. This blurring is what makes the study of mounds so challenging and so profound. You cannot always tell from the surface what is beneath. And even when you excavate, even when you map and measure, interpretation remains elusive. What was the purpose? What did the builders believe? What were they trying to preserve or signal or hide? The answers are not in the earth alone. They are in the patterns, in the alignments, in the networks that connect one mound to another across distances that dwarf individual lifetimes. The serpent mound is not just a mound. It is a marker in a landscape that includes other mounds, other earthworks, all of which, when viewed together, form a map. A map of the stars, perhaps, or a map of something older, something we have not yet learned to read. The Nazca lines in Peru offer a parallel. Geoglyphs, etched into the desert floor, depicting animals, geometric shapes, lines that stretch for kilometers. They can only be fully appreciated from the air. For decades, researchers puzzled over their purpose. Were they astronomical markers? Were they ritual pathways? Were they messages to gods or to visitors from the sky? Recent theories suggest they were part of a water cult, that the lines marked underground aquifers, guiding pilgrims to sources of water in a desert landscape. But this does not explain the figures, the spider, the hummingbird, the monkey. Those are representational. Those are symbolic. And they are massive. Why build symbols so large that no one on the ground can comprehend them? Unless the builders expected something to see them from above. Unless they were building for an audience that was not human, or not terrestrial, or not present. The same question haunts the mounds. Who were they built for? The living, certainly. They served as ceremonial centers, as burial sites, as gathering places. But they were also built for the dead, for the ancestors, for the continuity of memory. And perhaps, they were built for those who would come after, long after, when the names of the builders had been forgotten, when the languages they spoke had dissolved into silence. The mounds were built to last beyond forgetting. And they have. We walk past them. We build on them. We forget what they are. But they remain. Geometric. Aligned. Waiting for someone to notice. Waiting for someone to remember. In Australia, indigenous oral traditions speak of landscapes that were shaped by ancestral beings during the Dreamtime, a mythological past that is also a real past, encoded in story. These stories describe the formation of hills, the creation of valleys, the placement of rocks. And increasingly, archaeologists are finding that these stories align with geological events, with ancient sea levels, with landscapes that existed 10,000, even 20,000 years ago. The stories are maps. They are history, and they have been preserved, not in writing, not in monuments, but in memory, passed down generation to generation, surviving because they were told, because they were believed. The mounds, in their silence, do the same. They are stories in earth, and we are only now learning the language. The resistance to these ideas is understandable. Mainstream archaeology has spent centuries constructing a timeline, a narrative of human progress that moves from simple to complex, from nomadic to settled, from oral to literate. To suggest that sophisticated, continent-spanning cultures existed long before Sumer, long before Egypt, disrupts that narrative. It implies that we have misunderstood our own history, and it raises uncomfortable questions. If advanced societies rose and fell in deep prehistory, what guarantee do we have that ours will endure? What have we built that will survive 10,000 years? Not our cities, not our digital records. Perhaps only our nuclear waste, buried deep, will serve as our mounds, our markers, warning future beings of the dangers we left behind. The irony is grim, but the evidence for ancient complexity continues to accumulate. Göbekli Tepe, in Turkey, a site of megalithic pillars arranged in circles, dated to over 11,000 years ago, predates pottery, predates agriculture, predates everything we thought necessary for monumental construction. And it too was buried, deliberately filled in with earth, concealed, preserved. Why? What compels a culture to build alignments? Why bury them? And the answers, when they come, are never simple. At the Newark Earthworks, the lunar alignments are so precise that they could only have been created through generations of observation. But lunar cycles repeat. Why memorialize them in Earth? Why not simply record them, teach them, pass them down orally? Unless the Earthworks were not just records but tools. Unless they were designed to function, to focus intention, to serve as stages for rituals that required specific alignments at specific times. The earth, the sky, the human, all aligned. This is not primitive superstition. This is applied cosmology. This is religion, yes, but also science, the two not yet divorced, the understanding that the universe is unified, that above and below mirror each other, that to shape the earth is to touch the stars. In Malta, the Hypogeum of Halseflini, an underground temple carved from limestone, dates to around 3,000 years before the Common Era. It is a mound in reverse, dug down instead of built up, but the principle is the same. Sacred space hidden within the earth. Its chambers resonate at specific frequencies. When you speak, when you chant, the stone amplifies the sound, creates harmonics that vibrate through your body. This is acoustic engineering. The builders understood sound, understood resonance, understood how to create an environment that altered consciousness. And they hid it, not on a mountaintop, not in a visible temple, but below. Why? To protect it? To keep it secret? Or to ensure that only those who knew, those who were initiated, could find it? The mounds may serve the same function. Not all knowledge is meant to be accessible. Not all wisdom is meant to be broadcast. In many cultures, sacred knowledge is restricted, taught only to those who have proven themselves, who have undergone initiation, who understand the responsibility that comes with knowing. The mounds, then, are not museums. They are not public monuments. They are gatekeepers. Their secrets are available only to those who can read the landscape, who can interpret the alignments, who can excavate not with shovels, but with understanding. This is why so many mounds contain nothing, or seem to contain nothing. Because what they contain is not physical. It is encoded. It is the geometry itself, the placement, the alignment, the relationship to other mounds, to rivers, to mountains, to the horizon. The landscape is the text, and we are only now learning to read. In Ireland, the Boyne Valley contains not just Newgrange, but Knowth and Dowth, two other passage tombs, all aligned to different solar and lunar events. Together, they form a complex, a sacred landscape that tracks the cycles of the heavens. And they are covered, each one, by mounds of earth and stone, cairns that have withstood 5,000 years. Inside, the passages are carved with spirals, lozenges, geometric patterns that may represent maps, or stars, or something we cannot yet interpret. But the message is clear. This was important. Important enough to carve. Important enough to align. Important enough to bury within the earth. Protected, preserved, waiting for the moment when the light, at the winter solstice, at the equinoxes, would penetrate the darkness and illuminate the chamber within. This is theater on a geological scale. This is performance art that uses the sun as actor, the earth as stage, and time itself as the script. And it is replicated with variations across the world. The passage tombs of Europe, the burial mounds of Asia, the platform mounds of the Americas, all share this impulse. To create sacred space within or upon the earth, to align it with the cosmos, and to ensure its survival across centuries. This is not the work of scattered tribes with no contact. This is a shared understanding, a common language of earth and star, of geometry and alignment, of construction and concealment. Whether it's spread through migration, through trade, through some older, forgotten connection, or whether it arose independently in each place, the result is the same. A global network of monuments, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to remember what they are. But remembering is difficult. Our civilization privileges the visible, the written, the immediate. We build upward, not downward. We record in languages that require constant translation, constant maintenance. We trust in institutions, in libraries, in digital archives, all of which are fragile, all of which can be erased. The mounds, in their silence, in their endurance, rebuke this approach. They are low technology, yes, but they are immortal technology. They require no maintenance. They require no translation. They simply are. And as long as the earth exists, they will exist, holding their secrets, waiting for the moment when humanity is ready, once more, to dig. The act of excavation is a violent one. You tear into the earth. You disturb what has been still for millennia. You expose to light and air what was meant to be sealed in darkness. And yet we excavate, because curiosity compels us, because we need to know, because the mounds, in their silence, taunt us with the promise of answers. But every excavation is also an erasure. Once you dig, you cannot undig. The context, the stratigraphy, the delicate relationship between soil and artifact, all are disrupted. Modern archaeology tries to mitigate this through careful recording, through photography, through painstaking measurement. But the truth remains, we destroy in order to discover. And perhaps this is why so many cultures chose to bury their most important sites. Not just to preserve them from looters, from weather, from war, but to preserve them from us, from our need to know, from our inability to leave mystery intact. The Hopewell Interaction Sphere, a network of trade and cultural exchange that spanned eastern North America 2,000 years ago, left behind not texts, not inscriptions, but mounds. Hundreds of them. And within those mounds, artifacts from across the continent. Obsidian from the Rockies, copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, mica from the Appalachians. These were not utilitarian objects. They were ceremonial. They were buried with the dead, offerings to accompany them into the next world. But they also tell a story of connection, of networks that span thousands of kilometers, of cultures that, though they did not share a written language, shared something deeper. A cosmology, a set of symbols, a way of understanding the world that transcended the local and reached toward the universal. And then the Hopewell vanished. Around 400 years into the Common Era, the mound building slowed, then stopped. The trade networks collapsed. The great earthworks were abandoned. We do not know why. Climate change? War? Disease? Or perhaps a shift in belief, a realization that the mounds had served their purpose, that the knowledge they encoded had been passed on, that it was time to move forward, to build in different ways, to remember differently. The Hopewell's descendants, the cultures that came after, continued to build mounds, but not with the same intensity, not with the same continent-spanning ambition. The moment had passed. The network had dissolved. But the mounds remained. And they remain still silent witnesses to a way of life, a way of belief, that we can only glimpse through the fragments they left behind. In Southeast Asia, the Plain of Jars in Laos presents another mystery. Thousands of stone jars, megalithic vessels, scattered across the landscape, some weighing several tons. They are associated with burial practices, but their exact purpose is debated. And many of them are clustered around hills, mounds, earthworks that may be natural or may be artificial. Ground surveys have been limited by unexploded ordnance from the Vietnam War, making the region dangerous to explore. But what has been studied suggests a complex funerary landscape, a sacred geography where the living and the dead intermingled, where stone and earth marked boundaries between worlds. The jars, like the mounds, are ambiguous. They could be natural formations, carved by human hands. Or they could be entirely artificial testaments to a culture's ability to manipulate stone on a massive scale. The uncertainty is itself revealing. It shows how much we do not know, how much of our past is still hidden, still contested, still waiting for clearer evidence, for better technology, for a willingness to question what we have assumed. The Maldives, a nation of islands, has oral traditions that speak of a time when the sea was lower, when more land existed, when cities thrived that are now submerged. Marine archaeology has found structures underwater, walls, foundations, carvings, all submerged by rising seas at the end of the last ice age. If cities existed then, their monuments, their mounds, their markers, would now be beneath hundreds of meters of water, scattered across the ocean floor, invisible to land-based surveys. We have explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. What else is down there? What other civilizations, what other networks of knowledge lie beneath the waves, forgotten not because they were insignificant, but because the world changed and the sea swallowed their memory. Filled with grave goods, surrounded by moats, forbidden to the public. And they remain largely unexcavated, protected by law, considered sacred. The Japanese approach to archaeology is different from the Western. They do not excavate unless absolutely necessary. They prefer preservation in situ, maintaining the sanctity of the site, honoring the wishes of the ancestors who built them. This is not backwardness. This is wisdom, because once you excavate, the mound is no longer a mound. It is a hole in the ground, a source of artifacts, a dataset. It loses its presence, its power, its ability to awe. And perhaps that presence, that power, is more valuable than whatever knowledge might be gained from digging. The question then becomes, what do we owe the past? Do we owe it revelation, the exposure of its secrets to the light of modern science? Or do we owe it respect, the acknowledgement that some things are meant to remain hidden, that mystery is itself a form of knowledge, that not everything needs to be explained? Different cultures answer this differently, and their answers reveal as much about them as the mounds reveal about their builders. We, in the modern West, have chosen revelation. We dig, we scan, we publish, we make the invisible visible. But in doing so, we also flatten, we demystify, we turn the sacred into the mundane. The mound becomes a tourist attraction. The mystery becomes a museum exhibit. And something intangible but real is lost. But there is another way. We can study without digging. We can map without excavating. We can use technology to peer beneath the earth without disturbing it, to understand the mounds without destroying them. And perhaps, in doing so, we can preserve both the knowledge and the mystery. We can know that the chambers exist, that the alignments are precise, that the geometry is intentional, without needing to see them, without needing to touch them. We can let them remain hidden, as their builders intended, trusting that the earth will guard them for as long as the earth exists. And that trust, that restraint, might be the greatest lesson the mounds have to teach us. There is a stillness at the heart of the mounds. You can feel it even in photographs, even in descriptions. A heaviness, presence. These are not ruins in the traditional sense, crumbling walls and fallen columns. They are intact. They are complete. They are exactly as they were meant to be, covered, hidden, merged with the landscape. And that wholeness gives them a power that more visible monuments lack. They do not demand attention. They do not announce themselves. They wait. And in that waiting, they accumulate meaning, layer upon layer, like the earth that covers them. In China, the tomb of the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, is a massive mound, 76 meters high, visible from kilometers away. It has not been excavated. The terracotta warriors, the horses, the chariots, all were found in pits surrounding the mound, but the central tomb remains sealed. Ancient texts say it contains rivers of mercury, mechanical crossbows to kill intruders, a replica of the heavens above and the earth below. Modern tests have detected high levels of mercury in the soil, suggesting the texts may be accurate. But the Chinese government has chosen not to excavate. The technology, they say, is not yet sufficient to preserve what is inside. Better to wait, to let it remain sealed, than to risk destroying it in the act of revelation. This is patience on a scale that defies modern sensibilities. This is thinking in centuries, in millennia. This is the mindset of the mound builders, carried forward into the present. And it raises the question, what else have we chosen not to excavate? What other mounds, what other tombs, what other chambers lie beneath the earth, known but untouched, respected but unexplored? In Egypt, countless tombs remain unexcavated. In Peru, in Mexico, in Cambodia, in every region where ancient civilizations flourished, the majority of sites remain undisturbed. Not because we lack the technology, but because we lack the resources, the time, the permission. Archaeology is slow. Funding is limited. And every excavation is a gamble, a hope that what is found will justify the time and money spent. But the mounds do not care about our budgets. They do not care about our timelines. They will wait. They have waited this long. They can wait longer. In Norse mythology, the gods bury their dead in mounds, and those mounds become sacred sites, places of power, places where the boundary between the living world and the afterlife is thin. The Vikings, inheritors of this tradition, continued to build burial mounds, filling them with ships, with weapons, with treasures to accompany the dead on their journey to Valhalla. And some of these mounds, when excavated, have yielded astonishing finds. The Oseberg ship, the Gokstad ship, vessels built with such skill that replicas of them have sailed across the Atlantic. But most mounds remain unopened, and their contents remain a mystery. What heroes lie within? What stories went with them to the grave? We will never know unless we dig. And if we dig, we destroy the grave, we break the seal, we violate the trust that the mourners placed in the earth. This is the archaeologist's dilemma. Knowledge or respect? Revelation or restraint? In India, stupas, dome-shaped structures, mark important sites in Buddhist history. They are, in essence, mounds built of brick and stone, often covering relics of the Buddha or his disciples. They are not meant to be entered. They are circumambulated, walked around, meditated upon, but the interior is sealed. The structure itself is the offering. And this approach, this embrace of the exterior, of the form rather than the contents, is another way of honoring the past. The mound does not need to be open to be meaningful. Its presence is enough. Its shape, its location, its alignment, all convey meaning. The interior is secondary. Or perhaps the interior is not physical at all. Perhaps the interior is the intention, the devotion, the consciousness that built it. And that cannot be excavated. That can only be remembered, or felt, or intuited. In the Arctic, permafrost has preserved burial mounds for thousands of years, the cold acting as a natural freezer, keeping bodies, clothing, tools, all in a state of remarkable preservation. But climate change is thawing the permafrost, exposing these sites, threatening their contents. Archaeologists race against time, excavating before the thaw destroys everything. But even here, there is a question. Should we excavate? Or should we let the earth reclaim what it preserved? Let the cycle complete itself. Let the ancestors return to the soil without our intervention. There is no easy answer. The knowledge gained from these sites is invaluable, shedding light on cultures that left few other traces. But the disturbance is real. The bodies are not objects. They are people. And they were buried with intention, with ritual, with the belief that they would rest undisturbed. Our need to know does not negate their right to peace. The mounds, then, are not just archaeological sites. They are ethical dilemmas. They are philosophical questions made physical. What do we owe the dead? What do we owe the past? What do we owe ourselves, our curiosity, our desire to understand? And is it possible to honor all of these at once? The answer, perhaps, is that it is not. Every choice is a compromise. Every excavation is a sacrifice. We gain knowledge, but we lose the mound as it was, intact, complete, mysterious. We gain artifacts, but we lose context, the relationships between objects, the original placement, the intention. We gain data, but we lose the story, the human element, the sense of awe that comes from standing before something you cannot fully explain. And yet, we continue, because the alternative is worse. To leave everything buried is to leave ourselves ignorant, to accept mystery not as a virtue, but as a limitation. We are curious beings. It is, perhaps, our defining trait. We see a hill and we wonder what is inside. We find a pattern and we seek to understand it. This is not greed. This is not hubris. This is human nature. And the mounds, in their silence, invite this curiosity. They are puzzles, left by people who are gone, people who cannot tell us their intentions. And so we must infer. We must guess. We must dig, gently, carefully, reverently, but we must dig. Because the knowledge is valuable. Because the stories matter. Because the past is not dead. It is not even past. It lives in us, in our genes, in our languages, in the mounds that dot the landscape, waiting. The tools we have now would astonish the archaeologists of even a generation ago. LiDAR can map entire cities in hours. Ground-penetrating radar can see through meters of earth and stone, revealing chambers, foundations, walls, all without disturbing a single grain of soil. DNA analysis can tell us who the builders were, where they came from, who they were related to. Isotope analysis can tell us what to protect, to conceal. And when we do break through, when we do enter the chambers, we often find emptiness. Looted tombs, collapsed ceilings, sediment and water damage. The treasures, if they existed, are gone. The bodies, if they were there, have decayed. What remains is the structure itself, the geometry, the alignment. And we must infer the rest. We must imagine the rituals, the processions, the offerings. We must reconstruct the worldview from the fragments. And in doing so, we are as much creators as discoverers. We are building a narrative, stitching together evidence and supposition, fact and interpretation. And the narrative we build says as much about us as it does about the people we are studying. In the 19th century, when archaeology was young, mounds were pillaged for treasure, for objects to fill museums and private collections. Bodies were removed and displayed as curiosities. Sacred objects were treated as souvenirs. The damage done in this era is incalculable. Not just to the sites, but to the descendants of the builders, to indigenous communities who watched as their ancestors were disinterred, as their heritage was sold, as their history was rewritten by outsiders. The reckoning with this legacy is ongoing. Repatriation, the return of human remains and sacred objects to their communities of origin, is now standard practice in many countries. But it is slow, and it is contested. Museums argue that they are preserving the objects, making them accessible to scholars, protecting them from destruction. Communities argue that the objects are theirs, that they were taken without consent, that their place is not in a glass case, but in the ground or in ceremonial use or wherever the descendants decide. Both sides have points. Both sides are, in their own way, trying to honor the past. But they are honoring it differently. The mounds do not take sides in this debate. They remain, regardless of who claims them, regardless of who studies them. They are larger than politics. They are larger than nations. They are monuments to human effort, human belief, human hope. And they belong, ultimately, not to any one group, but to the earth. They are made of earth. They return to earth. And when the last archaeologist has retired, when the last museum has closed, when the last academic paper has been forgotten, the mounds will still be there, grass-covered, silent, enduring. Because they were built to outlast us. They were built to outlast everything. In South America, the Nazca people created the geoglyphs, and they also built pyramids, ceremonial centers, aqueducts. But many of their structures are buried, concealed beneath desert sand, invisible until excavated. And excavation in the Nazca region is difficult. The desert preserves, but it also hides. You can walk over a buried structure and never know it is there. Only when the wind shifts, when the sand erodes, when someone digs in the right place, does the past emerge. And even then, it is fragile. The dry air has preserved textiles, mummies, organic materials that would decay in any other climate. But exposure is lethal. Within hours of being unearthed, colors fade, fabrics disintegrate, wood crumbles. The act of discovery is also the act of destruction. And so archaeologists work quickly, documenting, photographing, preserving as best they can. But they know they are racing against entropy. They know that what they are revealing was safer in the dark. This is the paradox at the core of all archaeology. We must disturb in order to learn. We must damage in order to preserve. The mounds understand this. They are, in a sense, sacrifices. Their builders knew that someday perhaps someone would dig. And they prepared for it, encoding redundancy, placing multiple alignments, multiple layers, multiple clues, so that even if one was missed, even if one was destroyed, the others would remain. This is the genius of redundancy. This is the wisdom of not putting all your knowledge in one place, but scattering it, encoding it in landscape, in geometry, in myth, in practice, so that no single catastrophe, no single act of forgetting, could erase it all. And it worked. The mounds endure. The alignments are still measurable. The geometry is still decipherable. The myths are still told. The knowledge was not lost. It was transformed. It became folklore, became tradition, became the half-remembered stories that grandparents tell grandchildren, stories that begin, long ago, before our time, the old ones built. And the children listen and they forget most of it, but they remember the feeling. They remember that the world is older than they know, that there were people before, that those people knew things, built things, left things behind. And when those children grow up, some of them become archaeologists or historians or curious amateurs, and they start digging, start researching, start trying to reconstruct what was lost. And the cycle continues. The mounds, in their patience, wait for each generation to rediscover them. And each generation does. What remains to be said about the mounds? Perhaps only this: they are unfinished. Not in the sense that the builders abandoned them, but in the sense that their meaning is still being created. Every new scan, every new excavation, every new theory adds to what the mounds are, what they mean, what they tell us about ourselves. They are not static. They are not closed. They are open texts, invitations to interpretation, provocations to thought. And they will remain so as long as we continue to look at them, to wonder about them, to care about what they have to say. In Finland, burial cairns, the landscape, Bronze Age structures made of piled stones, covering cremated remains. They are not mounds in the earthen sense, but they serve the same function: to mark, to memorialize, to claim. And they are often found on high ground, on hills, on ridges, places where they can be seen from a distance, places where they command the landscape. This is strategic. This is territorial. But it is also spiritual. The dead are placed above, closer to the sky, watching over the living, guarding the land. And the living, when they pass by, remember. They remember the names, if they know them. They remember the stories, if they still exist. And if they do not, they still feel something, a presence, a weight, a sense that this place is important, that something happened here, that the ground is not neutral but charged with history, with intention, with meaning. This is what the mounds do. They charge the landscape. They transform geography into cosmography. They make the earth meaningful. And in doing so, they offer a model for how we might live, how we might build, how we might think about our own place in the world. Not as conquerors, but as participants. Not as masters, but as stewards. Not as individuals, but as part of a continuity that stretches back into the deep past and forward into an unknowable future. The mounds say, you are not the first. The mounds say, you will not be the last. The mounds say, build for those who will come after, not for yourself. In the American Midwest, modern developments have destroyed countless mounds. Shopping malls, highways, housing subdivisions, all built atop sites that were, until the bulldozers arrived, intact. Some were surveyed before destruction. Most were not. They were simply erased, their contents mixed with the fill, their geometry obliterated. This is loss on a scale that is hard to comprehend. Each mound was unique. Each held information, stories, connections. And each erasure is irreversible. You cannot rebuild a mound and have it mean the same thing. You cannot reconstruct the context, the stratigraphy, the relationships. Once gone, it is gone. And yet, the destruction continues. Because land is valuable. Because development is necessary. Because the past, for many, is not as important as the future. This is a choice. And it is a choice that reveals what we value, what we prioritize, what we are willing to sacrifice. But there is resistance. There are laws now, in many countries, that protect archaeological sites, that require surveys before construction, that mandate preservation when possible. There are indigenous activists who fight to protect sacred sites, to prevent desecration, to ensure that their ancestors are not disturbed. There are archaeologists who dedicate their lives to documenting, to preserving, to educating the public about the importance of these sites. And there are ordinary people, citizens, who visit the mounds, who walk the earthworks, who stand in the passage tombs and feel the weight of time, and who come away changed, who understand, perhaps for the first time, that history is not just dates and names, but places, presences, connections. The mounds create these moments, and those moments matter. They ripple outward, changing how people see the world, how they value the past, how they think about the future. In the end, the reason for burying architecture remains, as the plot promised, unknown. We can speculate, we can theorize, we can excavate and analyze and debate. But the true answer, the intention in the minds of the builders, is lost. They left no written explanation. They left no manifesto. They left only the structures themselves, and the silence that surrounds them. And perhaps that silence is intentional. Perhaps the mystery is this is a way of being in the world that does not separate human from nature, living from dead, past from present. It is all one. And the mounds, the earth, the ancestors, they are all part of the Wakapapa, the great genealogy that binds everything together. If we adopted this view, how would our relationship with the mounds change? Would we still dig? Would we still survey, scan, analyze? Perhaps. But we would do so differently. We would ask permission. We would consult with descendants. We would approach the mounds not as objects, but as beings, entities with their own presence, their own agency. We would listen, not just with instruments, but with intuition, with respect, with humility. And perhaps, in listening, we would hear something we have missed. Perhaps the mounds have been speaking all along, and we have been too busy measuring to notice. Perhaps their message is not in their geometry, not in their contents, but in their presence. In the simple fact that they exist, that they endure, that they remain. The message is, we built this, we cared, we remembered, and so should you, and we do. Not all of us, not always, but some. There are people right now walking across a field, pausing at a rise in the ground, wondering, is this natural, or is this something else? And in that pause, in that wondering, the mounds fulfill their purpose. They make us think. They make us question. They make us aware that the world is deeper than it appears, that history is not confined to books, that the past is here, underfoot, waiting. And that awareness, that sense of connection to something larger, older, more enduring than ourselves, is what the mounds offer. It is their gift, and it is a gift worth receiving. The story of the mounds is not over. It is unfolding still, with each new discovery, each new interpretation, each new generation of scholars and enthusiasts who take up the work. In South Korea, archaeologists are using drones and AI to identify potential burial mounds, surveying vast areas in a fraction of the time it would take on foot. The algorithms are trained to recognize the subtle signatures of artificial structures: regularity, symmetry, alignment. And they are finding sites that would have been missed otherwise, sites that have been hidden for so long that even local residents do not remember they are there. This is the future of archaeology. Not replacing human intuition, but augmenting it, allowing us to see patterns that are too large, too subtle for unaided perception. The mounds are revealing themselves, and we are learning to see. In Peru, the Caral Soup civilization, one of the oldest in the Americas, built pyramids and plazas over 5,000 years ago. And for centuries, they were ignored, dismissed as natural hills, because they did not fit the narrative of Andean development. It was not until the 1990s that archaeologists recognized them for what they were: monumental architecture, contemporary with the Egyptian pyramids, evidence of a complex society thriving in a time and place where none was supposed to exist. The discovery rewrote the history of the Americas. And it is a reminder, we do not know as much as we think. The landscape is full of secrets. The mounds are waiting. And our assumptions, our certainties are always provisional, always subject to revision. This is the humility that the mounds teach. We are not the pinnacle of knowledge. We are not the end of history. We are a point on a continuum, and a relatively recent one. The people who built the mounds were not primitive. They were sophisticated, observant, capable of planning and execution on a scale that rivals anything we have done. And they did it without steel, without machinery, without computers. They did it with their hands, with their knowledge, with their collective will. And what they built has outlasted empires. It has outlasted languages. It has outlasted entire cosmologies. The mounds endure because they were built to endure. And they endure because they are simple. Earth, geometry, alignment. These do not require maintenance. They do not require updating. They simply are. And in their simplicity, they achieve a kind of immortality that our more complex technologies cannot match. Consider our own legacy. What will future archaeologists find 5,000 years from now, when they sift through the ruins of our cities? Plastic, perhaps ubiquitous and undecayed. Concrete, fractured and eroded. Steel, rusted into unrecognizable lumps. and data locked in formats that no longer exist on media that have degraded, encrypted with keys that have been lost. We have built a civilization of astonishing complexity. But we have not built for eternity. We have built for convenience, for speed, for profit. And when we are gone, when our infrastructure has failed, when our power grids have collapsed, when our satellites have fallen from orbit, what will remain? Not much. Certainly not enough to reconstruct who we were, what we believed, how we lived. We will be a mystery, a gap in the archaeological record, a lost civilization, unless we build mounds. Unless we encode our knowledge in something simple, something durable, something that does not require power or maintenance or interpretation. Unless we learn once more to build for the future. But we are not learning. We are building faster, more complex, more fragile. We are creating systems that depend on constant input, constant monitoring, constant repair. And when those systems fail, as they inevitably will, we will lose everything. The mounds, in contrast, require nothing. They sit, silent, intact, waiting, and they will outlast us. They will outlast our buildings, our roads, our monuments. They will outlast our names, our stories, our civilizations, because they are part of the earth. And the earth endures. In Scotland, there is a project to build a modern burial mound, a cairn, using traditional techniques but with a contemporary purpose. To mark the site of a new community, to create a focal point, a symbol of continuity and connection. The builders are volunteers, people from all walks of life, each adding a stone, each contributing to the structure. And when it is complete, it will stand as the ancient cairns stand, a marker, a memorial, a message to the future. We were here. We built this. We cared. This is not nostalgia. This is not atavism. This is recognition that some practices, some technologies, some ways of being in the world are timeless. The mound is one of them, and it is being rediscovered, not as an artifact, but as a living practice, a way of marking place, of creating community, of honoring the past while building for the future. The architecture beneath the hills is not dead. It is dormant. It is waiting for the moment when we are ready to engage with it, not as a curiosity, not as a resource, but as a teacher. The mounds have lessons to offer. Patience, vision, humility, reverence, continuity. And these are lessons we need, because our world is fractured. Our time is accelerated. Our attention is scattered. And the mounds say, slow down, look deep, think long, build for those who will come after. This is wisdom. This is not ancient wisdom, in the sense of something outdated or irrelevant. It is perennial wisdom. It is as true now as it was 5,000 years ago, and it will be true 5,000 years from now, when the cities we have built are ruins, when the languages we speak are forgotten, when the mounds, silent and enduring, still mark the landscape, still encode the stars, still whisper to whoever has ears to hear. We were here. We knew. And we built so that you might know, too. There is a question that hangs over all of this, a question that has been implicit in every paragraph, every observation, every speculation. Why did they bury it? Why take something monumental, something that required generations to build, something that encoded knowledge and belief and cosmology, and cover it with earth? Why hide it? This is not a question we can answer definitively. The builders left no written explanation, but we can speculate. And in speculating, we can approach an understanding, not of their specific motivations, but of the range of possibilities, the ways in which a culture might think about architecture, time, and legacy. One possibility is protection. If you expect catastrophe, war, climate change, societal collapse, the safest place for knowledge is underground. Stone can be toppled. Libraries can be burned. But earth protects. It insulates, conceals, and it endures. A buried structure is safe from looters, from vandals, from conquering armies. It is hidden, forgotten, preserved in stasis until some future generation, some future civilization, uncovers it. This is time capsule logic. This is thinking in deep time, accepting that your own civilization may not survive, but hoping that something will, that someone someday will find what you hid and understand its value. The mounds in this reading are acts of preservation. They are insurance against forgetting. They are messages in bottles, launched not across oceans, but across millennia. Another possibility is ritual. Every day, the mounds remind us of this. They are anchors, holding us to the deep past, connecting us to ancestors we will never know, whose names have vanished, whose languages have dissolved, but whose work remains. And in that work we see ourselves. Not literally, not in the sense of shared culture or belief, but in the sense of shared humanity. The builders of the mounds were like us. They looked at the stars and wondered. They felt the changing seasons and tried to understand. They faced mortality and sought to leave something behind. They were curious, ambitious, reverent, afraid, hopeful. They were human, and their mounds are human achievements not in scale alone, but in spirit. They are expressions of the human need to create, to mark, to communicate, to endure. And that need has not changed. We feel it still. We build still. We strive still. And the mounds, in their silence, say, yes, this is what we do. This is who we are. But they also say something else, something harder to hear, something that makes us uncomfortable. We are not unique. We are not the first to achieve complexity, to encode knowledge, to build on a monumental scale. We are not the pinnacle. We are a continuation, and continuations can end. The mounds are evidence of civilizations that rose and fell, that built and vanished, that left traces but not descendants, or not descendants who remember. And if it happened to them, it can happen to us. This is the unsettling truth at the heart of the mounds. They are warnings as much as they are monuments. They say, do not take survival for granted. Do not assume progress is linear. Do not believe that what you have built will last forever. It will not. But if you build wisely, if you build for the earth and not just for yourselves, then something will remain. Not everything, but something. And that something, that trace, that whisper, may be enough to spark remembering in those who come after. We are, perhaps, on the verge of such a moment. We are building, furiously, constantly, consuming resources at a rate that cannot be sustained. And we are losing, equally furiously, the knowledge that is not digital, not recorded, not written down. Indigenous languages, oral traditions, practices that have been passed down for generations, all are vanishing, faster than we can document them. And when they are gone, we will have lost not just information, but ways of knowing, ways of being, ways of relating to the land and the cosmos that are fundamentally different from the dominant paradigm. The mounds were built by people who had those ways of knowing. And perhaps, if we listen to the mounds, if we tried to understand not just what they are but how they think, we might recover some of that. We might remember how to live in balance, how to think in generations, how to honor the earth not as a resource but as a relative. This is not nostalgia for a lost golden age. There was no golden age. The past was hard. People suffered. People died. But there were also things they understood, things they practiced, things they built that we have forgotten. And the mounds are archives of that understanding, encoded not in words but in form, not in data but in presence. And if we can learn to read them, if we can learn to see them not as objects but as texts, then perhaps we can recover some of what was lost. Not to recreate the past, that is impossible, but to inform the future, to offer alternatives, to show that there are other ways of being, other ways of building, other ways of relating to time and space and the cosmos. In Iceland, the sagas speak of landnam, the claiming of land, the marking of territory. The settlers would build cairns, piles of stones, to mark boundaries, to assert ownership, to say, this is ours. But they also understood that the land was older than them, that it belonged to itself, that they were tenants, not owners. And so they built with respect, with care, with the understanding that the land would outlast them, that their claim was temporary, that the cairns were not permanent assertions but temporary markers, reminders to themselves and their descendants of who they were and where they came from. This is a different way of thinking about architecture, about monuments, about legacy. Not as domination but as conversation. Not as conquest but as relationship. And the mounds, in their quiet endurance, embody this. They do not dominate. They do not shout. They simply are. And in being, they invite us into relationship, into conversation, into a way of thinking about time and place that is radically different from the hurried, extractive, individualistic paradigm that dominates modernity. The mounds are teachers, but they are patient teachers. They do not insist. They do not demand. They wait. And when we are ready, when we are willing to slow down, to listen, to feel, they will teach us. They will teach us about time, about patience, about the long view. They will teach us about community, about collective effort, about building for others rather than for ourselves. They will teach us about the earth, about how to shape it without destroying it, about how to build in ways that enhance rather than degrade. And they will teach us about mystery, about the value of not knowing, about the importance of leaving some questions unanswered, some secrets sealed, some knowledge hidden. Because not everything needs to be revealed. Not everything needs to be understood. Some things are meant to remain mysterious, meant to inspire wonder, meant to remind us that we are small, that the universe is large, and that there is always more, always deeper, always further to go. The networks span continents. This is not speculation. This is measurable fact. From the Mississippi to the Amazon, from Britain to Japan, from Scandinavia to the Sahara, mounds rise. And they rise in patterns. Not random, not scattered, but aligned, connected, part of systems that suggest communication, coordination, shared knowledge. How? We do not know. But the evidence is there. The same geometries, the same astronomical alignments, the same impulse to build in earth, to encode in landscape. And this suggests something profound, that human cultures, even when separated by oceans, even when developing independently, arrive at similar solutions. Not because they are copying, but because the universe is the same everywhere. The stars move in the same patterns. The seasons cycle in the same rhythms. And humans, wherever they are, observe and respond. The mounds are responses. They are humanity's collective answer to the question, how do we mark our place in the cosmos? How do we align ourselves with the forces larger than us? How do we ensure that what we know survives? And the answer, across cultures, across time, is the same: we build. We shape the earth. We create geometry. We align with the stars. We bury, we conceal, we preserve. This is not accident. This is not coincidence. This is pattern. And pattern implies order. Not imposed order, not centralized control, but emergent order, the kind that arises when individual agents, following simple rules, create complex structures. The mounds are emergent architecture. They are the result of countless individual decisions, countless communities choosing to build, to align, to remember. And the sum of those decisions is a global network, a web of monuments that, when viewed from above, from the perspective of satellites or gods, forms a map. A map of what? Of the earth? Of the stars? Of both, overlaid, merged, made one? This is the question that drives researchers. This is the pattern they are trying to decode. And every new discovery, every new alignment, every new connection adds to the picture. But the picture is not yet complete. It may never be complete, because some of the nodes, some of the mounds are gone, plowed under, built over, eroded by time. The network is fractured, and we are trying to reconstruct it from fragments, to infer the whole from the parts, to understand a system that was vast and complex and intentional, but never written down, never explained, only enacted. In China, the concept of feng shui, the arrangement of space to harmonize with natural forces, is thousands of years old. And it governs, among other things, the placement of structures, the orientation of buildings, the flow of energy through the landscape. The mounds, when viewed through this lens, are not random. They are strategic. They are placed at points where energy converges, where the earth and sky meet, where the forces of yin and yang balance. This is not superstition. This is applied cosmology. This is a way of understanding the world that sees it as animated, as alive, as responsive to human action. And whether or not you believe in qi, in energy, in the metaphysical claims of feng shui, the practice itself is sophisticated. It involves observation, measurement, calculation. It involves deep knowledge of terrain, of hydrology, of astronomy. And it produces structures, landscapes, arrangements that feel right, that work, that endure. The mounds are part of this tradition. They are placed where they are for reasons. And those reasons, even if we do not share the cosmology that produced them, are worth understanding. Because they tell us how people thought, how they related to the land, how they built in harmony rather than in decay, not as failure but as transformation. And the mounds, in their own way, embody this. They were built to endure, yes, but they were also built to change, to be covered by grass, by trees, by time, to become landscape, to become indistinguishable from the natural world. This is not loss. This is evolution. The mound does not disappear, transforms. And in transforming, it achieves its ultimate purpose, to become eternal not by resisting change, but by embracing it. And yet, we excavate, we expose, we resist the transformation. We want the mound to remain as it was, as we imagine it was, pristine, intact, understandable. This is our need, not the mounds. The mound does not care. It will endure, or it will erode, or it will be destroyed, and none of these outcomes matter to it. It is inert, a pile of earth, a shape. What matters is what we do with it, how we relate to it, what meaning we make from it. And this is where the responsibility lies. Not with the mound, but with us. We are the ones who choose to preserve or to destroy, to honor or to ignore, to remember or to forget. The mounds are passive. We are active. And our actions, our choices, determine not what the mounds are, but what they become, what they mean, what they offer to the future. In this sense, archaeology is not just the study of the past. It is the creation of the past. We do not discover history. We construct it. We choose which sites to excavate, which artifacts to preserve, which interpretations to promote. And those choices shape the narrative, the story we tell ourselves about where we came from, who we are, what we value. The mounds are part of that story. But they are a part we are only beginning to understand, only beginning to incorporate. For too long, they were dismissed, ignored, considered unimportant. But as we learn more, as we map and scan and analyze, we are realizing that they are central, not peripheral. They are evidence of complexity, of sophistication, of ambition, in places and times where none was expected. And this is rewriting history. This is expanding the narrative. This is making space for voices, for cultures, for achievements that were previously excluded. The mounds are reclaiming their place in history. And in doing so, they are changing history itself. But the story is not just about the past. It is about the future. Because the mounds, in their endurance, in their patience, in their silence, ask us a question. What will you leave behind? What will endure of your civilization, your culture, your life? What will future generations find, if they dig, if they look, if they care to search? And the answer, for most of us, is uncomfortable. We will leave trash. We will leave pollution. We will leave depleted resources and altered climates. We will leave digital ghosts, fragments of data, incomprehensible to anyone without the right software, the right hardware, the right context. We will not leave mounds. We will not leave monuments. We will not leave anything built to endure. And this is a choice. It is a choice we are making collectively by default, by not thinking in deep time, by not planning for the long term, by not caring about what comes after. The mounds rebuke this. They say, you can do better. You should do better. And they offer a model, simple and enduring, for how. The mounds are not finished teaching us. Each generation rediscovers them, reinterprets them, finds new meaning in their silence. In the 19th century, they were curiosities, sources of treasure, evidence of lost races. In the 20th century, they became scientific objects, sites to be measured, mapped, analyzed. In the 21st century, they are becoming something else. Symbols of resilience, of continuity, of the possibility of sustainable architecture, of long-term thinking. They are being reclaimed not just by archaeologists but by indigenous communities, by environmentalists, by artists, by anyone looking for alternatives to the unsustainable, extractive, short-sighted practices of modernity. The mounds are being reimagined, and in that reimagining, they are becoming contemporary, relevant, urgent. In Australia, indigenous fire management practices, suppressed for over a century, are being revived. These practices, developed over tens of thousands of years, involve low-intensity burns that reduce fuel loads, promote biodiversity, and maintain the health of the landscape. They are not primitive. They are sophisticated, adaptive, effective. And they were encoded not in manuals but in practice, in oral tradition, in the land itself. The mounds are similar. They are encoded knowledge. And just as indigenous fire practices are being revived, so too can the knowledge of the mounds be recovered, not by excavating, but by observing, by learning to read the landscape, by understanding the principles that guided their construction. This is not archaeology. This is ethnography. This is learning from the past to inform the present. And it is desperately needed. In the Netherlands, a project called Turpen is using traditional mound-building techniques to create new settlements in flood-prone areas. The Turpen are artificial hills, raised above the floodplain, providing safe havens for communities as sea levels rise and storms intensify. This is not nostalgia. This is adaptation. This is recognizing that old technologies, old ways of building, may be more appropriate, more resilient, more sustainable than modern alternatives. The Turpen are mounds. They are ancient and contemporary, rooted in tradition but responsive to present needs. And they are working. They are providing safety, stability, continuity in a landscape that is changing rapidly. This is the future of architecture. Not skyscrapers, not glass towers, but earthworks, resilient, adaptive, embedded in the land. In Japan, the concept of Satoyama, the managed interface between mountain and village, involves shaping the landscape to create diverse, productive ecosystems. Hills are terraced, forests are thinned, wetlands are maintained, and the result is a landscape that is both beautiful and functional, that supports human life without degrading the environment. The mounds fit into this tradition. They are part of a broader approach to landscape management, one that sees the earth not as a blank canvas, but as a partner, a collaborator, a living system that must be worked with, not against. And this approach, applied consistently, produces landscapes that endure, that remain productive for centuries, for millennia. The mounds are part of this legacy, and they offer lessons for how we might build, how we might shape our own landscapes, in ways that are sustainable, that honor the earth, that ensure continuity. The reason for burying architecture, then, may not be a single reason, but a constellation of reasons, a way of thinking that encompasses protection, ritual, humility, and adaptation. It is a way of building that accepts impermanence while striving for endurance. It is a way of encoding knowledge in form, in geometry, in landscape so that it survives even when language fails. It is a way of honoring the earth, of working with it, of seeing it not as material to be exploited, but as partner to be respected. And it is a way of thinking in deep time, of planning not for years or decades, but for centuries, for millennia, for the long arc of human existence. This is the wisdom of the mounds. And it is wisdom we need. Because we are, right now, at a turning point. The climate is changing. Resources are depleting. Ecosystems are collapsing. And the systems we have built, the infrastructures, the economies, the political structures are proving inadequate. They are too rigid, too short-sighted, too dependent on constant growth. And when growth stops, as it must, they will fail. And we will be left with the choice. Do we rebuild in the same way, repeating the same mistakes, or do we learn? Do we look to the past, not for nostalgia, but for guidance? Do we study the mounds, the Turpen, the terraces, the Satoyama, the practices that endured, and ask, what can we learn from them? What principles can we extract? What approaches can we adapt? This is not about recreating the past. It is about learning from it. It is about recognizing that some technologies, some ways of thinking, some approaches to landscape and community are timeless because they are based not on fashion or ideology, but on the fundamental realities of earth, water, sky, and time. The mounds are still here. They have survived ice ages and warm periods. They have survived migrations and invasions. They have survived us, and they will continue to survive as long as the earth exists. They are monuments to endurance, to patience, to the long view, and they are invitations. They invite us to slow down, to think deeply, to build wisely. They invite us to consider what we are leaving behind, what legacy we are creating, what story future generations will tell about us. And they invite us to choose differently, to build not for profit or convenience, but for endurance, for beauty, for meaning. The mounds say, this is possible. We did it. You can too. And in saying this, they offer hope. Not naive hope, not wishful thinking, but grounded hope, based on thresholds, invitations to step out of the everyday and into the deep time of the earth, the long memory of the landscape, the enduring presence of those who came before. They are, in the fullest sense, monuments, not to kings or conquests, but to humanity itself, to our capacity for vision, for effort, for creation, for memory. And they are gifts left by people we will never know, for reasons we can only guess, encoded in earth and stone and geometry, waiting, always waiting, for us, for you, for the moment when you stand on a hill and pause and wonder and feel, for just an instant, the connection, the thread that runs from the deep past, through the present, into the unknowable future, the thread that is woven into the mounds, into the earth, into you. And in that moment, the mounds fulfill their purpose. They connect, they remind, they endure. And you, standing there, are part of that endurance, part of the story, part of the mystery, and the mystery, as always, remains.